Pop quiz viewers, what does Bubsy and my old Wii have in common? Curiosity killed it, and then necromancy was attempted on it but failed. And then necromancy was attempted again, but with better results somehow. Spicing up a game series through a new, fully original entry almost always takes a major new thing to be put in, as not many sequels intend to be just second volumes of the original game. Of course, there have been many times throughout gaming history where sequels haven't always been received as well as previous entries, that's natural, but there are also numerous times that successors fucked up so much that their series ended up just going into hiding for years. Some may return after and some may fail to see the light of day again. So for this video I'll be covering games that were so panned that they were considered to have killed their series, at least for some time. Though do note that I will be loose with my criteria of series killing games at times. I might as well start off with the game I joked about at the start of this video, Bubsy 3D. Throughout the 4th console generation, small development studios were using the traits of Sonic as a reference for their planned big mascots. You know, have an anthro animal character with some cool shit thrown in. You had Rocket Knight with the titular rocket boosting mechanic, Awesome Possum with the environmentalist messaging, and of course Bubsy with... I guess he was just based off a fever dream. Yeah, it was like this cat with a shirt of red exclamation mark and he was floating around. Bubsy was already having a longer lifespan than other platformers based around planned mascots, as it did have a few more games after the first, albeit the second and third titles were pretty samey. But where things got really interesting was when Accolade saw the revolution of true 3D gaming. So they started to work on a new 3D platformer for the series. And then they saw the pre-release footage for Mario 64, looked back at their game and said, God fucking damn it, we're so fucked. One deadline nailing developers Eidetic in the balls later, and Bubsy 3D was released in November of 96 in the US and August 97 in Europe. Initial reviews were pretty mixed, but in the modern day, yeah, you've probably seen all the hate for it already. But hey, I'm playing at least a bit of all these games for this video, so let's get dangerously close to the dumpster fire. Yeah, it's okay for my persona as a pyromancy user. The game's opening is pretty much an exposition dump that explains that the antagonists of the series, the Woolies, have abducted Bubsy, but he did manage to escape from the rocket he was contained in. Going into the first level, we're immediately met with probably the worst thing about the gameplay, tank controls. Yeah, turning the camera with left and right on the D-pad is abysmal, and even if you're playing in an emulator where you can remap the controls, the stepped actions with L2 and R2 are slow hops to the sides instead of actual strafing, though you can freely move side to side while jumping, and if you jump onto a steep slope facing to the side of the camera, you have a brief period to jump again before sliding down, which if that wasn't intended to be there, then that's one hell of an oversight. It breaks parts of the level design wide open. One of the most criticized things about this game is Bubsy's commentary, including his voice, which is a shame because his voice actress Lynn otherwise has some pretty good talent and even voiced for an actually good PS1 game, Tail Concerto. You guys know about Tail Concerto, right? No? Honestly, when you put his explanations for things in the game in the first level aside, he actually doesn't talk that much, and you are actually given the option to disable the voice lines in the game. His voice is surprisingly the least annoying thing here, honestly. As for the rest of Bubsy's moveset, you have this mechanic where you can hold square to shoot the main collectible atoms instead of picking them up, which does make you get creative with positioning when dealing with enemies, but I would have just preferred to pull from the supply of atoms already collected. And there's Bubsy's signature glide, which honestly doesn't feel effective at all. Overall, from the first level, it's definitely bad, but I doubt it's as horrific as critics over the years have made it out to be. And believe me when I say that our next game has someone with a whole lot more verbal abrasiveness. Now, I've been into skating on and off for a while, both in real life even though I can barely do anything on a scooter, and in the form of playing skating games. Tony Hawk's Underground 2, Morgan Skate Club, Boostville, and of course my beloved Bomb Rush Cyberpunk. One game I've been interested in playing for a while is Skate 3, but my dumbass kind of introduced myself to the series in the worst way possible, playing the most recent entry, simply named Skate. Apparently the developer said it's not really meant to be Skate 4, so I guess I'll just call it Skate 25 since Skate 1 also used a period in its name. Now, some of you may be thinking that this game is way too recent to be on here, but I personally think that this is unfortunately likely to be the death of the series, as all the negative reputation around this game is gonna make EA think that people aren't gonna want new entries in the series going forward only because they hated this one. On a surface level, Skate can be described as the primary competitor to the Tony Hawk games, but Skate does have a fair amount of differences, such as having more physics-based gameplay and having a unique trick system. For a while, the series ended off with Skate 3 and is remembered for being a very good trilogy, but EA was feeling lucky and said maybe necrophilia will work to our benefit this time. Even if you're not a skater or haven't even played skating games before, you likely associate skateboarding, whether it be at a skate park or especially on the streets, with stuff like rebellion from authorities, punk rock, underground communities. But in Skate 25, that's all sanitized away to probably cover EA's ass. You're given an AI companion named V, which is already a red flag, and even though you're given the option to specifically disable her comments to things you do in gameplay, her voice will eventually get extremely grating anyways because she'll still be talking constantly during missions either way. It's honestly a relief that she has an actual voice actor instead of an AI generated voice, and to be fair, this is their first voice acting gig, at least from what's listed on IMDb, so from one Lynn with two ends to another, at least you tried. It's not just this little clanker at the bottom of the screen that's the problem here, as the basic lore setup in the game is that the councilors of the city of San Vansterdam have started an initiative to get residents into the skating scene, and the city's modeled to be like one mega skate park rather than a general civilization. This is far from what the skating culture the game claims it respects is like, as a major factor of street skating is making use of an environment not meant for skating by grinding on stuff like curbs and the like, weaving through passing pedestrians, and so on. Considering this makes the skaterized bit from one of the NPC's dialogue feel ridiculous, as there isn't really much improvising you need to do for the environment. Another thing is how bailing and falling from heights is handled, as it's explained here that the player character feels no pain at all because of technology from a startup company named Impervatech. Contrast that with the previous Skate titles, where gaining points from impact after bailing is a notable mechanic and is even the focus of the Hall of Meat type missions. The Impervatech thing also kinda takes away from how the risk of pain is why it takes quite some bravery to skate in real life. All of this is on top of how the game is even more sanitized and bastardized from skating culture with AAA corporate greed. We're talking unneeded live service being labeled as early access to have people hope it'll improve once it's finished, guys, and the RIP chips, the currency used in game, being used for loot boxes instead of just directly unlocking clothing. So yeah, this game gives a crusty shit exterior over a weirdly okay interior? Yeah, the game itself is honestly not too awful. I doubt it's better than the previous Skate games. As said, I haven't played the other games yet, but the control options do help a lot with getting comfortable with playing, and it still feels good having the tricks be done through movements of the right stick. It's honestly pretty cool to see the concept of motion inputs usually used in fighting games be used in games from different genres, but yeah, there's no point to playing this over the previous Skate games besides the MMO element of having other players be visible. My closing word on Skate 25, this is the opposite of grind fiction, collect my RIP chips. Around the late 2010s to early 2020s, Sega was doing new titles for their series introduced in the Dreamcast era. Samade Amigo had Party Central, Crazy Taxi had a middle finger, and Space Channel 5 had Space Channel 5 VR. Kinda funky newsflash. Only kinda funky. Released in 2020, SC5 VR feels like a decent match for VR devices, as Beat Saber really showed how VR rhythm games could work, and the characters characters did perform dancing, or I guess more like posing motions to dance during gameplay, so hey, you had a good method of input. Everything seems pretty good about it, so we'll need to hop into the game to see what the problem is. This game sees the series protagonist Ulala being alongside the player character, which the player is now taking the role of one of two new characters, the twins Rue and Key. I realize their names are supposed to derive from the word rookie, but Rue's name just reminds me of my Fursona species, especially with the alternate translation of Lou. The plot of the game follows Ulala and neither of the twins going after what's essentially a space parasite named Glitter, who's absorbing an energy named Groove Moxie from others, and by the end it's explained that he possessed some space diva of the same name. Oh, and he's voiced by the same guy who voices Nanba in Yakuza 7. Very based. And yeah, my explanation may seem extremely simplified besides the extra stuff about this bitch, but this is where the game's problem comes in, the lack of content. The Space Channel 5 games were already pretty short, in fact shorter than even Sonic Forces, but this game only has 4 damn levels, and most of the playthroughs found on YouTube are only around 30 minutes long. 30 fucking minutes! I'd say a lot of the length of playing the first 2 games in the series are from their difficulty, both in the complexity of the charts as well as the timing window. And don't get me wrong, I am perfectly cool with the pose inputs in here being much more lenient to those to accommodate for motion controls in the context of a rhythm game, but I really wish the main story had more to it. It sucks because the gameplay itself is actually really fun for the short time it lasts. You're given certain types of inputs outside of throwing your arms in a specified direction, like with dodging hazards and doing unique poses. It's definitely a good workout as well. Now we do have an extra level featuring Hatsune Miku as well as a more arcade-ish mode, but it's nowhere near being able to justify its base price. It's a good rhythm game, don't get me wrong, but please only get it when it's on sale, or if this ever gets a decent modding scene, but that's unfortunately wishful thinking. As for how this game impacts the series, it's actually kinda considered to be the third mainline entry, though with the lack of content as well as being stuck on VR devices, which admittedly limits its reach for a lot of people. I fear the series is unlikely to return for a 4th go-around, at least for a while. Of course, it wasn't the only time in Sega's third-party developer history where they fucked up a series. It is the sequel! The poster boy of their series killings is with their primary one, in fact. That's right, I'm covering the Sonic the Hedgehog reboot from 2006 next. A whole load of factors rushed this game's development, and it obviously did not end well at all, evident by how much it clearly damaged the series' reputation. The game tries to go for a gritty approach has already been done with Shadow the Hedgehog. I guess a good term is more of a somewhat realistic approach. Well, about as realistic as you can get with this. I mean, hell, before Eggman's appearance, this opening looks like something straight out of Final Fantasy XIII more than anything. Now, from my experience playing the game, the controls are extremely weird. Sonic moves around fine for the most part on ground, but landing on things with jumps are hard to nail, and when using Lightspeed Dash to get across to the first level, I often fell because of it being cancelled by the ledge. But we are getting ahead of ourselves here. The plot, or at least the first bit of it, is about Eggman kidnapping a woman named Elise, who is the princess of a country named Soliana, to use her powers for acquiring the Chaos Emeralds. Sonic saves her from Eggman's initial attack, but she's quickly nabbed anyways. Honestly, that's the most I can tell you from what I've played, but later on the new character Silver is thrown into the mix, and I actually kinda like the plotline of him believing that Sonic would be the reason that a world-ending calamity would be in the future. But also that leads into not only an infamous boss fight, but also making the whole plot way more convoluted with the time travel aspect. I do commend how the game's levels have unique sections where you briefly play as a different character. Tails in the case of the first level, but he felt even more awkward to control, like he moves faster in the air than on the ground, probably to emphasize Sonic's speed, but that wasn't considered a big deal in other Sonic games, so why isn't in this one? Now Now, I do apologize to anyone who thought I should have put more time into the game. I have quite a lot of games to cover here, and most of them are my first time playing through them, despite how much I've heard of them beforehand. Regardless, I think it's safe to say that Sonic 06 still sucks even after all these years. Now, Sonic 06 was the first step Sonic made into the 7th console generation, but a series that decided to do a reboot despite having some experience in the generation beforehand already is Devil May Cry, in the form of the 2013 release DMC Devil May Cry. Now, the series was already well respected, so much that series protagonist Dante was featured in Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne, and DMC4 was generally liked by critics alongside having pretty good sales. The only stain on the series' reputation at this point was DMC2, which the third game had made up for. So with all of this considered, why was there a need to make a reboot, especially such a drastic one like DMC X2? Simple, let the Americans have some fun. Capcom was also experimenting with the developer, as they had brought on Ninja Theory for their development on a previous PS3 hack-and-slash action game, Heavenly Sword, which I'd say bringing in a developer experienced with the genre is a justified move. But regardless, the game was panned for throwing out everything about the Devil May Cry universe that fans loved. Even as someone who's only played DMC5 before this one, I can tell that the game makes plenty of efforts to spin in the face of the original universe, such as with the infamous bit with the Dante in this game with his generic 2010s game protagonist design throwing aside a white wig that lands onto his head, and how he's got his Sparta out at the start of the game. But I'm not gonna lie, this is a Skate 25 situation with how I actually love the gameplay. In fact, I'm just gonna say it, I'd take this over DMC5's combat any day. Trust me, I've seen obsessive DMC5 fans enough to know that I've definitely pissed them off. Having actual defensive options like sidestepping and parrying rather than the pathetic excuse of an advanced technique known as jumping honestly makes for way more satisfying, fair, and stylish looking combat. I also like the occasional use of environmental hazards, as it allows for even more creativity with combos and makes each area feel much more diverse. And they're not used too much anyway, so they aren't intruding on the time to let Dante's moveset shine on its own. And it gets better as the Angel and Demon weapon system introduced in the second level works extremely well in how they can be flown into combos seamlessly and how they balance variants and combos with having their unique purposes established. Overall, I actually really like DMC X2 as a good old hack and slash game. It's certainly a shame that it falters as a Devil May Cry game just for the sake of following the gritty hard reboot trend of the 7th console generation, but it's one to add for your PS3 library if you're a huge sucker for this kind of action game. Trust me, I can go on for a good while talking about good hack and slash games. So, for example, arguably the most popular developer known for their contributions to the genre is Platinum Games. Founded by former Capcom devs that worked on a lot of their cult classics, which is probably another reason why DMC X2 was outsourced, their debut title would be the 2009 release Madworld. This game, alongside the at the time duology of No More Heroes, stood out for being an extremely violent game in the Wii's library, and quickly grew to be a huge cult classic on the system. In my experience playing it, I was initially mixed on how it played, but upon revisiting it a few months later, I was really enjoying the gameplay, soundtrack, visual direction, writing, and the overall style. It turns out Platinum decided to make a spiritual sequel known as Anarchy Reigns. It initially released in July of 2012, but the publisher Sega just decided, delay the game for no reason for the West, which led to Metal Gear Rising overshadowing its release. So yeah, part of why this game failed was because of Sega's incompetence. I assume while most would say that this game and Madworld don't really need direct sequels, the chances of us getting even a remaster of either title is reduced, as the way Sega went about releasing this game pretty much killed their partnership with Platinum, since this would be the last Platinum title that they'd publish. Even Bayonetta's Wii U release would be published by Nintendo, though I really wish Anarchy Reigns didn't fail because honestly, it goes fucking hard. It takes a unique approach to arena fighters by having an open stage where up to 16 players go around and gain points mainly by killing each other until time's up, which is great because most Battle Royale games are just left to being shooters, but this one really broke the conventions of Battle Royale games before others could, and everything's brought up to 11 thanks to the traditional Platinum Games flair being thrown in. You have basic light and heavy attack strings, but the type of attacks that do high damage are each character's killer weapon moves that are tied to their own unique meter, which really adds more depth into how you can damage an opponent. Enemy mutants as well as items are scattered throughout the stage, and extra random events like carpet bombings and black holes spice up the matches in a good way, at least in a non-competitive environment. The 360 attack is also really good in how it does indeed help for dealing with multiple players close to you. It also works exceptionally well as an emergency defense mechanic where you can spend some health to do a high knockback move, and while it does have a large startup, it gives invincibility for that period. It's like investing money, but way cooler because the currency's your blood. Rampages are essentially the universal power install of this game where you're invulnerable and can pummel others quickly, which does feel great to use, as long as you're not on the receiving end, then it's just annoying. Two rampaging players can even clash against each other, deciding who kills the other through a button mash off. You see, that's the real reason why people jerk themselves, so they're good at Anarchy Reigns. I'm rampaging it! Overall, the gameplay of Anarchy Reigns is amazing, and honestly, it's a bit heart-wrenching how some of the other aspects of the game are so rough compared to it. And the soundtrack. This game's music is really fucking good. Being a multiplayer-focused title ended up really clashing a lot with the ability to stay faithful to the original Madworld, such as with the need for more traditional action combat for a competitive environment being way different from the bread and butter of Madworld's combat style, focusing on piling on different torture methods from the environment to get more points off of a single enemy. The art style incorporates full color as a primarily grayscale style like Madworld would probably make telling visuals apart and gameplay difficult, but I still feel like they could have gone about the visual direction better than the generic semi-realism style they went with. An art style with a lot more focus on heavy cell shading, or maybe even a western comic style would have, at least in my opinion, kept with the spirit of the original game way more. From what I've seen from the game's critics, the single player campaign is the most underbaked part of the game, and I somewhat agree. Don't get me wrong, they were really putting in a fair amount of effort with putting in stuff like multiple story sides, unique mission types, and boss battles against both computer players as well as unique NPCs, but it still feels like mostly just a light thing to go along with the meaty multiplayer options. Going off of a developer blog article on the story mode's development, it was clear that the team lost sight of accommodating time and resources for making the story mode the best it could be, which left them panicking for when they actually got around to making it. And it just sucks because Anarchy Reigns, despite its flaws, deserved to perform way better in my opinion, because it was clear this is still a great game and was as much of as a passion project as any other Platinum release from the time it's in. I highly urge you to pick up a copy of this game, or at least spread awareness of it. Secondhand copies average out $15, and the online community could really use more members. I hope it can get a split-screen multiplayer mod, or maybe even a recompilation project similar to Sonic Unleashed to make up for the lack of crossplay between the 360 and PS3 versions. Ooh, okay, there were a few more games I wanted to cover, but for now I think I can only handle one more game. In 2003, the studio Idle FX was developing an action platformer game named Drake, featuring a cel-shaded visual style as well as being like a mix of Batman comics and the work of film director John Woo, known for his work on films like Mission Impossible 2. Drake was meant to be a starting point for a planned multimedia franchise, even releasing a promotional comic during development as well, so what I mean with a series-killing game is a bit different in this case. Those who saw the beta liked it, but the game was unfortunately having trouble being developed, as while in Ex-Majesco employee under the name of DarkFeltX estimated the development time to be around 18 months. There seemed to be quite some difficulty with communication between Idle and Majesco. Finishing development in October and releasing in November, the game would be released as Drake of the 99 Dragons onto the original Xbox and Windows. Much like Bubsy 3D, the game was panned across the board and would be considered one of the worst games of all time. So let's see if that statement holds up from my experience playing it. We open on a training area as the protagonist Drake monologues about how fucking cool he is while twirling some pistols around.
Those who know my name whisper it in fear.
It's Xavier, the Renegade Angel! Really, he looks like a character Steve Blum would voice, but he actually sounds like Xavier a bit. Anyways, there's a tutorial after the cutscene on Drake's controls, and my issue from it comes from how slippery and floaty he feels in the air. The guns Drake wields, one mapped to each trigger, can shoot farther than your auto-targeting range, but it feels weird having to consider the point of which gun you're firing from when long-distance shooting. And when you're in auto-targeting, it's hard to tell what you're aiming at, since while there is an indicator, it has a pretty low opacity, which makes it hard to distinguish when you're focusing on the combat. Speaking of, the first enemy you're pitted against is a robot powered by a human soul, which conveniently comes in after Drake sees a commercial from the manufacturer Tang Industries about it.
Has someone close to you recently departed? Tang Industries pay families to donate the bodies of their departed loved ones.
Jesus, that's like paying to put advertisements on tombstones. True story, by the way.
Okay. Are you on the pipe?
The fight that ensues is just running from the bot and trying to turn and shoot while you have enough distance. Yeah, pretty boring. Also, about my previous comment, I'm not gonna lie, the cutscenes are almost like if Xavier Renegade Angel was attempting to be unironic.
I sensed presence inside it. A soul? Oh, what was that? Intruders in the penthouse of the 99 Dragons clan? You must be out of this world to get past our guards.
Drake runs into the room containing an artifact, but it gets stolen, and instead of immediately pursuing, he talks to his choppy-looking master before heading off, which leads into an extremely frustrating chase level. Not from the time limit, as the amount of time added with each section you go in makes it lenient if you're hurrying, but with how hard it is to shoot down the enemies along the way while not taking damage that adds up quickly with each encounter, the thief phases through a window to get away, so Drake checks on the master only to find him laying dead alongside Drake as well, meaning that Drake didn't realize that he was only a spirit when he was chasing the thief. Cut to a flashback of the master fucking paralyzing him to knock sticks together over him, which gives the Undying Dragon tattoo and the supernatural powers that come with it. In other words, Drake can now double jump and use a janky wall run. The next mission is centered around collecting souls from defeated enemies, which is infinitely more bearable since collecting souls recovers your health. Drake then jumps through a window and fucking dies.
Nothing can stop me now.
Drake's death introduces the Serene Garden, an area home to these annoying-ass statue fuckers that talk down to Drake when he dies. Not just in this cutscene, but also when you die in-game. Yeah, from the next level onwards, whenever you die, you're teleported to the Serene Garden, a voice line of one of the statue bitches taunting Drake plays, and you're forced to wait 10 fucking seconds before replaying the mission. This honestly could have just been streamlined by having the voice line play alongside unique card of the Serene Garden in the loading screen when restarting the mission, but of course the game just does it to pad itself out. I can actually think of another game that does this purgatory area after dying mechanic, that being the Mario 64 ROM hack Star Road. That is way less annoying since you're only thrown in after you lose all your lives rather than every time you die, albeit Drake doesn't use a limited life system, and you have a small little level to run through rather than literally just watching a timer timer ticked down. After that's another chase level, now with vehicular manslaughter-induced floaty controls, and then another chase level with a bunch of damn explosives that makes it really easy to die in, which is where I decided to call it quits for this game. Yeah, Drake's a mess. Garbage controls, awful gameplay, and hilariously bad presentation. I'm surprised they went through the effort of re-releasing the game on Steam, even through an ironic context. So yeah, that's just a look through various games that fucked up their series reputation for a long while. While most of these games were indeed bad, some of them were actually at least somewhat solid. They were just plagued by enough flaws to keep them down. I hope this video introduced you to, or at least brought you some more insight about these games, and can maybe even help you find your own value in these as well as other titles despite the bad reputation they brought to themselves and their series. And as for me, I'll be working on what I can do now that my childhood Wii is back up and running. What could possibly go wrong? I should be careful with what kind of homebrew I'm putting on this thing.